This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Sorry about that. I literally had to fly in from outer space.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
The story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, is, well, title gives it away. I'm here to talk of the stories of film. I talk about development stories, production stories, behind-the-scenes stories, marketing stories, all the bits and bobs that go to make the films that we know and sometimes love, just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. You've happened upon one of my special episodes of the podcast where I bring a filmmaker in and in this case, talk about their body of work. The filmmaker in question is director Michael Caton-Jones, and I've been drawn to lots of his films over the years. And for instance, just in the build up to this, I had a look at Shooting Dogs for the first time and rewatched Memphis Belle. But what we're going to do is, because lots of his stories aren't out there, we're going to take his film career from his second movie, Memphis Belle. His first was Scandal, and there's been quite a lot out there on Scandal because of its BFI Blu-ray release a year or two ago. So there's lots of material out there if you want to find out about the making of that. But then I just kind of want to take it from that point onwards and find the stories of how he got on with his film career and the stories of the movies that he made. Now, I should point out in advance, this is an episode filmed in lockdown over Zoom. So one or two slight little audio issues. Also, because lockdown, we're in houses with people in, so occasionally you're going to get a dog bark. I think a doorbell goes off at one point, but you know, it's human. I've left it all in, proof that we're all just battling on in very, very odd times, really. One more just advisory before we get into this as well. There's some fruity language in this one. Let's just say there's the kind of fruity language that would instantly make the BBFC give this a 15 certificate. So bear that in mind before you press forward. If I've not put you off, I genuinely think this is a really interesting chat. Not because of me, because of him. And we really do go through an awful lot of stuff that I don't want to spoil here. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to play you a clip from his latest movie, Our Ladies. As you'll hear at the start of my conversation with Michael, I let him choose which film I pick a clip from. Our Ladies is a film that debuted at the London Film Festival in 2019, a really terrific movie. At the time this has been recorded, and possibly at the time this podcast is being released, it doesn't yet have a release date in the UK because its cinema release was delayed for fairly obvious reasons. It is worth seeking out once it arrives. I'm going to play you a clip from the trailer for that, and then straight into my chat with Michael.
Some of you are going to Edinburgh for the first time today. You will carry yourselves with grace. But I must warn you, there are men there that would use and discard girls like you. Yes, Fionnuala?
See, when you say use and discard, sister, how do you mean?
Now, Fionnuala, she was the leader.
We should do an all-nighter.
Let's meet up in what, 2 hours? Shell could get boys like a Catholic girl.
Hello, Edinburgh, open your legs. You are mental.
Kyla had a voice, but she was devious too.
What do you think of those two?
They're about as much fun as a day at the morgue.
Amanda was the comedian.
We'll get a citation from the Vatican at this rate.
And me, I was waiting for a miracle.
I'm Stephen, with a PH.
Orla.
Oh, with a la.
So that was a clip from a movie I've not picked yet at the time of recording this, by director Michael Caton-Jones, who I'm delighted is joining me for a Film Stories podcast special. Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Which film would you like me to pick a clip from to introduce you with? I mean, I'm quite happy to pick, but I figure I should give you the honours.
Oh God, that's a tough one. Actually, it's usually the most recent one, but it's not come out yet.
Well, we'll get to that, but that's exactly the clip I'll start with. So just to introduce to people who don't know it, Michael's most recent film, which premiered a year and a half ago, is the brilliant Our Ladies, and we'll come to that at the end. So that's what you've just cunningly heard a clip from, if all has gone swimmingly to plan. I've been following your work for a while, I realised, and you're not a film director really who's put your story out there so much, and that's kind of really what I want to go through. Really, that you made Scandal in your 20s, which I just find incredible, and I know you've talked an awful lot. You've been asked an awful lot about that, and there's a brilliant BFI Blu-ray of that that's come out as well. That's just packed with stuff. I just wonder if we can pick your story up with Memphis Belle, because I just think that's. I mean, growing up, I was brought up in a UK that wasn't making big mainstream films, and Memphis Belle, even though it's funded by a Hollywood studio, was a big mainstream film. And also, as I've grown up, I've appreciated that Lord Putnam was coming out of a pretty ill-fated time running Columbia Studios at the time. So I wonder if I can just shut up and if you can tell me your Memphis Belle story.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you have to go kind of back a few years before that. To when I was at film school and what have you. Well, I'm a working class boy for a start, and I didn't go to. I left school at 15 and a half, and that was my further education until I went to film school. So I was working on work. So I treated film like it was a craft, like it was a vocation, but because I didn't know anything about film at that time, I embarked on a kind of serious, hellish study. I watched 3 pictures a day, every day, and I would make notes about them, and I would try and figure out why I liked them and what was good about them and who directed them and what have you. So I ended up doing a lot of study of the kind of Hollywood classic films and what classic film directors did, which all kind of led me to knowing a lot about the sensibility of the 40s. And the war years. So my whole thing when I started working in film was, I'm going to Hollywood. That's what I'm going to do eventually, because I really like these, like John Ford and Howard Hawks. So these directors who were really, they would turn their hand to anything. They would, they absolutely controlled their self-expression, but they did it within an environment that was sort of making any kind of film. So that's really what I aspired to. So when I'd made Scandal, it was a small independent British film at the time. And it was exactly at that time that David was leaving Columbia, and he was looking for something to do to get him back in the game after the studio. And it just coincided that Scandal and that film and me came along at the same time. It really was Kathy Weiler. I like David enormously. He's a really good producer, but it was really Kathy Weiler who was holding my hand as I was going through it. I realized, I'd never done a special effect in my life. I didn't know anything. I just knew how to work with actors in a room. So I felt this was going to be a kind of crash course in learning as well. And they would pay me to go to California, to walk into a studio and to work out how studios worked. And I could do that while being in Britain, working in a system that I understood. So there were a lot of advantages to me at that point. It was a complete learning job, I guess, to go to a studio, to cast people in Hollywood when, nothing about it. It really taught me an awful lot about the mechanics of the film business, because it was still kind of studio heavy at that point. And then I knew the film was looked at as David's, but I thought I could sneak in under the radar. So I did it. I worked for 3 months. It was the hardest job I ever did. It was really, really hard. But I learned an incredible amount. I had 10 different actors, so I had an ensemble cast to look after all the time. I had to figure out how to shoot aerial sequences way in advance. How to actually break it down. It was extremely technical, the film, and kind of the triumph is that it kind of holds together on a human level. It was just pre-computer, so some of the effects are a little bit iffy nowadays. But at the time, it was, it was an incredible opportunity for me, is what I would say. And I learned an immense amount, and it was a calling card for Hollywood as well.
There's just before we came on, I was just telling you I found an on-set report that Barry Norman did for Film 90 on Memphis Belle, and Lord Putnam's interviewed as part of that, and he talks about the thing that really shone out for him about Memphis Belle is lots of Hollywood films are fast, and the drama of this one was it was slow, and the point where they decide are they going to go back round again is a very slow, tense decision. How did when he came to you, because I understand he approached you while you were making Scandal or in the midst of that, how did he pitch it to you, and was it Scandal presumably that had put you on his radar?
Yeah, it was actually a mini series I made before I made Scandal called Brond, which was set in Glasgow, and it was as I was leaving film school, and I was kind of the young hot guy at that time. I was one of them, and I was just ridiculously ambitious, and I was ridiculously ambitious. And it was actually, I read one script at that point. I was making this film. I thought, okay, I'm going to make another one, and there were no scripts. It was 1989, I think, something like that. And the whole film business went through the toilet. There was only 2 films shooting at Pinewood when I made that. I kind of, because as I say, my stated aim for myself was to make commercial films and go to Hollywood and make studio films, because that was obviously I could see that as a career, a bunch of rungs to head along. And I've just forgotten what I was saying, so
But I mean, you talk there about balancing an ensemble cast. I know on Twitter you've been praising the script, but it's Monty Merrick, I think it is. But I mean that it's a very simple statement for you to say, but from me, from the outside looking in, that's quite terrifying, because if I've got it right as well, you weren't that much older than some of the young actors that you cast in the movie as well. I just wonder if you can talk to the experience on the set of that, if it was a bit all in it together.
No, I was their boss, essentially. I come from a Scottish background, as you can hear. I have no problem being in charge. I have no problem exercising authority in that way. I come from a background where you speak your mind and you say what you think. And I had worked 5-6 years to get to that point. And I had a bunch of American actors who were shocked that there were no craft service on set and they had to pay for their cups of tea. They were kind of spoiled. But the first thing I did, because I'd read about it a lot, was to create an ensemble feeling. And to do that, I sent them on a boot camp. I got 2 guys who were stunt guys, and they were SAS guys. And they took them out into the woods and they made them camp and live together and do loads of stuff together. And the ridiculous amount of good things that came from that made the film, in my opinion. I sent them out to get to know each other, so that it would, and what happens is on screen, even the body language, the way they behave, it can only be done when you know someone really well, you know? So it became something that they came back after that week, completely different people. They understood it completely, but I had to maintain a distance. And again, I had learned that it was almost military-like, because And again, as I say, some of the things you learn as a director is not little tricks, but just that you have to maintain a separation from you and your actors to maintain an authority. You can be part of it with them, but you must maintain an authority. And that, again, stands you instead all the rest of your career. So for them, I wanted them to, here we were doing something that couldn't rely on any movie tricks. You couldn't do stuff. It was very naturalistic in a way. So you had to find the drama within the acting. Even though there was all this stuff going along, you had to believe that they were scared. You had to believe that they wanted to get through. You had to believe they were friends. You had to believe a whole load of things. And nobody really talks about, it's very difficult for me to look at my own films and gauge them. All I can do is kind of say what it was I was intending, and did I get halfway there or not, if you get out alive, that's a bonus. Is really the way I would say.
I'm fascinated by you as a teenager watching Howard Hawks' film, particularly in relation to Memphis Belle, I think, and making studious notes. I just wonder, does any of that, when it actually comes to the point where you step onto a film set, does all that preparatory work help? I mean, presumably it gives you some kind of foundation.
No, it makes you who you are. I mean, I believe education is the answer to everything anyway. Yeah. So I left school when I was young, but I was educated, and I was taught to learn how to learn. So every time I do a picture, I really throw myself completely into it. There are different aspects to it. There's the story itself, there is the people you're dealing with, there is the milieu of it and the texture that you're trying to create, and they're all slightly different. Yeah. And you can research a lot of that to try, because a film is made of one shot at a time. Yeah. You make that shot as best you can, and then you make the next one, and then you stick them all together. So I tend to try and keep filmmaking down to its simplest elements. Yeah. Yeah. And I think anything you've done in preparation for that comes back at one point, especially making mistakes. You make mistakes and you think, oh, right, fuck, I'm not going to do that again if I can help it. Yeah. Of course you do, but it's much like life. You just get a lot better at heading off the mistakes before you even conceive them.
Yeah. I mean, I rewatched the film for the first time since it first came out, because I remember it being a big deal. I mean, I was 15, 16 when it came out, and it was a big deal, and British films were not a big deal. And then to get hold of a Blu-ray of it, I've had to use something called the Warner Archive Service, where they make them on demand. Yeah. And they've put, I mean, fair dues to them, they put some of the extra features on. But I just wonder if you get a sense, I mean, how you felt when the film came out, and there was buzz around it. I mean, I remember that. And then what happens when you've made a film and other people take on like the disc releases and stuff, and in a way, a bit of its legacy?
Well, it's a pain in the ass if they do it badly. You know, it's like forever is going to be, I can't remember that color. It's usually that, and they try and they get a bit technical with it. But what I find interesting is the behind the scenes stuff, is the stuff about how you made it or what you were thinking of at the time. So that's to that extent, I'm less interested in opining about its cultural reference or relevance than I am about the techniques, because I believe you should, leave that to the imagination and leave that to the audience. It's up to them to start discussing things. I like making films. Yeah, I really like making films. I like the technique of it. I like the people. I like the whole part of it. So I always much rather talk about how I made it. Yeah, and what was intended than anything else.
With that in mind, before we leave Memphis Belle, I mean, looking at some of the looking at this Film 90 report and some of the extra features on the tier, I mean, it really gets across how physical this was. You had great big planes. Oh, God, you had a big airfield. I just wonder if you can just talk to that just a little bit, because you talked about it was the toughest film you've done. I do want to just going into the spirit of. Why? What was the toughness? And
well, the biggest problem, we talked about Howard Hawks. Howard Hawks had made a film called Air Force, which was actually set in a B-17, which looked like a large luxury plane. Steven Spielberg had made a Amazing Tales or something like that about a B-17 landing, and he had also shot it with wide-angle lenses. So I made a decision when I first went to Binbrook to see what a B-17 was like, is to when I climbed in it, I thought, fuck me, this is really tight. This is really tight. And to try and get into the ball gunners, it was like really claustrophobic. And I remember thinking, I haven't really seen that happen except in Das Boot, the submarine film. So I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make it. I'm not going to go wider than a 50mm lens. And a 50mm lens is like that, and it's basically your eye, what you can see with your eyes. You couldn't see everything, so I'd made that decision to try and make it feel claustrophobic by shooting it that way. Now we had to break down the airplane into 10 separate compartments with cycloramas and things, and it was on a gimbal that did that. Better. But we had to be on another platform with a crane, with a hothead, just to get a close-up. So some days it would be moving, we'd be moving, and person would be moving, and you'd take like 4 hours to get a close-up. It was killing us, And also it was one of the hottest years for years. Yeah. And the kids in they were sitting in there, they had like layers of clothes on, they were sweating. As soon as they start sweating, we'd run up and dab them down, get out the way, turn over, do the acting, get up, and it was that every single day. And it was only when I got to the 2 days before the end, I hadn't shot any of Harry Connick. There was a lot of, yeah. I had to do him in about 2 days flat, just him in the back of the plane.
Yeah.
Things like that, you just learn, and you learn quick.
There's a new memoir that's just been written by Mark Harris of Mike Nichols. I think you might enjoy it because it talks of making Catch 22, and when Nichols decided that he was going to shoot in the cabin of a ship, and he just said one person there, one person there, one person there, one person there, and someone just turned around to him and said, "Well, who's going to fly the bloody thing once you've got everyone in there?"
Exactly. But the thing is that so the film split into two quite separate parts.
Yeah.
The stuff outside, and one was the stuff in the plane. The outside was, we had 5 planes. We crashed one crashed on takeoff and was destroyed. And to me, that was just coordination. There's different muscles that you use as a director. And what was important to stress in the story was there were planes, there were guys, there was an airfield, and this was the world. So if you set that up up front, you don't need to show such big numbers all the time through a film. It was stuff like that I learned, but I'd learned a lot of that by reading and watching classic Hollywood directors.
Yeah.
How did they deal with that problem, that situation?
You said that your ambition was always to go to Hollywood, and your next film, in more than one way, took you to Hollywood. And the thing, reading around the film Doc Hollywood that you made with Michael J. Fox, and I ordered a magazine which I thought would have this nice, great big thing on it, which I'm just showing you there. Turns out it's just got a picture of Michael J. Fox. And that sort of goes a bit to the story of the behind the scenes of Doc Hollywood. The things that you learn are that's where Michael J. Fox discovered the first traces of Parkinson's. That Pixar then, if their lawyers are listening, let me put this generously, paid tribute to it with the film Cars. But the one thing that struck out for me is you went to Hollywood to make a Hollywood film nowhere near Hollywood. If I've got it right, you shot it in Florida.
That's right.
And that's distance from I've spoken to filmmakers who've made films for studios who just say, get as far away from the studios as possible. And I just wonder if you can talk to the experience of that film. Those are all the questions I've got, just because there's precious little out there about Doc Hollywood. I wonder if you can tell us a bit about it.
Well, I actually started working on Doc Hollywood before Memphis Belle had come out.
And that was always for Warner Brothers.
That was for Warner Brothers. In those days, Warner Brothers was a fantastic place. If you did something good for them, they liked you. They wanted you to stay there. It was Terry Semmel and Bob Haley were the bosses, and I had done Memphis Belle. And they said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I've kind of done 2 dramas, and what I always wanted to do was a comedy." And they said, "Oh, really? I said, like a classic screwball comedy. That was what I was a fan of." And it turned out that Michael J. Fox was also a fan of it, and we had a film in common that we both thought was the bee's knees, which was called The Awful Truth, which is a Cary Grant and Irene Duncan film. It was very, very funny, but it betrays a sensibility. If you like that kind of film, it tells you the sensibility of the person's sense of humor. And Michael Fox and I got on really, really well about it. We just understood. He was a terrific actor, really a good actor. Technically brilliant. He could walk 2 paces, stop, turn on a dime, sit, change his weight, all the things that keep it working on screen. He found it difficult to go deep. We had a scene which we cut from that film, which was about him talking about his dad, and his father had died some 6 months before, and he was he just couldn't get into it because it was too personal to him. I thought he was terrific. With Woody Harrelson, who I had met when I was out there, everyone knew him from Cheers, and I said, "Look, your first instinct, of course, is to show you're an actor and be something completely different." I said, "But if it doesn't work, you might get knocked back for a year before you get to do anything else. So you should, in my opinion," and I said this is how I convinced them, "you should do a character that's close to what he is known for all over, which was the character in Cheers, and do an extension of that in a different way." And he did, and he actually kind of stole the film in some ways just by his little, his smaller part. I also putting him with Bridget Fonda was good, because Bridget was a really good serious actress, but she also understood comedy. Also understood. It was a very happy time for me. I did, though, I agree, try and get as far away from the studio as possible.
So that was deliberate that you.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, you know, you love them. I mean, difficulty dealing with studio. Studio is like a big bang.
Yeah.
You have to make them feel as though they're in decent hands, and they're not going to have to take the blame if it fucks up, and everything fucks up. So at one point, the blame is coming. And, you know, to be honest, the job of the role of a studio executive is really simple. Be as close as you can to something that's successful, and be as far the fuck away from something that doesn't work. Yeah, I learned that very quickly there as well. When there was kudos to be had, I was surrounded, and when not, I couldn't get my phone answered, my phone calls answered. So you learn. I'm glad I went out there and learned the game, but over a period of years, I began to get a little more disillusioned with the kind of stuff I was making.
With this kind of stuff you were making in Hollywood, or were being asked to make in Hollywood?
Yes, it was. It was not where I'm essentially European, and was, you know, even though my technique was learned from a lot of American films, my sensibilities were more, you know, lower budget, smaller films. In the end, I like more personal things. But I was lucky enough to be able to do bigger things. So what the hell not?
So I mean, Memphis Belle and Doc Hollywood were both successes for Warner Brothers. And I mean, Doc Hollywood, I watched it for the first time a couple of years ago. Actually, I missed it when it first came round, and it's just like, it's really weird just seeing a comedy that's so bereft of cynicism.
Yeah,
it's nice.
I was going through I refer to it as my Capra period.
Well, quite. I remember that in the reviews at the time.
Because I knew Capra and I knew Hawks. I knew what I wanted to do, which was the more cynical kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I also knew that, you know, to do a comedy, to do it in the sensibilities of the 30s or 40s might ostracize some folk, but it might just work in the magic of a dark room.
Yeah.
You know?
It makes it pretty timeless as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that about most of my films, is that they can, you know, they're meant to be universal in some way, and they're meant to be timeless. They're not meant to be fashionable or specific to that time. It's more, you know, you should be able to pick up a story. You should be able to watch a picture of mine, and have the sound off and know what you're seeing. You know what's going on between people, because you use all these things when you're directing.
So you said you were looking for something darker, and something darker duly came along with This Boy's Life I'm talking about now, which you made with De Niro and was Warner Brothers again, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
But by De Niro, does that mean it's a New York picture? I know he kind of
No, it was actually, I made it in Canada.
Oh, even you really got the knack of that early.
I did learn how to do it. Yeah. I did a little bit in Hollywood on Doc Hollywood, just the a couple of studio bits and pieces, but the rest of it was
just to show your face somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, the success of Doc Hollywood kept making money. It kept going down like 10% each week. It was quite a long running thing. But the studio then thought, oh, he's the guy with the answer, isn't he? So they said, what do you want to do next? And I said, well, I read this thing the other day and I thought it was really good. And I went, oh, shit, that one. They weren't really that enthused, because Art Linson, the producer, had been knocking on their doors to try and get. And I said, that's really the one and I told him, of course it'll be commercial. Of course I would make it that way. That's the way I wanted to do it. Of course I had no clue. You never have any clue.
Because this was before, go on, sorry.
It was definitely the kind of film I wanted to do. I generally wanted to get away from what I'd just done.
Yeah.
In general, I would try and do something different, whether it was a physical thing or an intellectual thing. But they said, well, you can do it, but make it cheap. And they cut the budget and sent me. And I really wanted to go to Canada anyway, because it just meant that the executives are lazy and they don't really want to get on a plane and come and visit you.
Yeah.
So, as long as you're staying on time, on schedule, and on budget, which I'm pretty good at, they stay off your back. That's the great thing about a studio. If you can, show them that it's all going to work, they will give you the money and they'll let you go do it. But essentially, I was making a film about me growing up in Broxford in Scotland. I was a smart boy in a small town, and I understood how that felt, the feeling of being trapped and what have you. And I felt that I could do this one pretty good. And I actually, because I'd made Doc Hollywood as a commercial entity, and this one was much more kind of for me, I started to tap into things that I was familiar with, feelings that I was familiar with growing up, and people and environment. And I thought, I was really proud of This Boy's Life. I thought it was a really good picture. And I made it, and it opened on a Friday night. And I got a call from the studio on the Saturday saying, well, it didn't really perform so as well as we thought, so we're going to yank it. So that was a year and a half of my life on something that I knew was a decent picture. And I was told the night it opened that they were going to pull it because they had The Fugitive and they wanted more screens back. And I got very down about the response to the film because I knew it was decent, but it just didn't work. And then you get very philosophical about things. You can make them, but you can't, make people like them or make people see them.
I remember it being really well received.
Yeah,
at the time. I certainly remember critically it really spiked.
Yeah, the difficulty is in the studio system, they really don't care about critics because they're going to flood the market with advertising. It's just big business to them. So they kind of look at reviews. It's great if you get them, but if you don't get them, it doesn't matter to us. We're going to do this or that based on financial questions anyway.
So around that time, with This Boy's Life, I was reading a book on James Bond a couple of weeks ago, and your name spikes up related to James Bond in '93, I think it was, when they were looking for directors to make GoldenEye, and it was you and Peter Medak's name were mentioned there. Is that just gossip, or was there some serious entertaining there?
I met with them a couple of times. I met with Cubby Broccoli once in California. He'd been told, "Oh, this is a hot young guy. Get him. He's British." And I went to see him, but at that point, I had Rob Roy.
Yes, coming to that in a minute.
I had the script of Rob Roy that I wanted to. So I kind of took the meeting so that I could get the script to John Calley, who was head of United Artists at the time. Yeah. And a few years later, I went to meet Barbara and Michael Wilson in London for one. It was the one where it was the ice thing. I can't remember.
Oh, Die Another Day.
There was some dreadful old tosh about the Koreans and stuff. And I went in. I said, "Well, obviously, it needs a bit of work," and of course, they loved it. And it kind of brings home the difficulty that Bond faces all the time. I mean, they didn't. I was too mouthy for them to like. To be honest. But to do Bond, you need to have a certain caliber of director to handle all the logistics and what have you of it. But any caliber of director that can do that is not going to be told what to do. Yeah, and that's kind of a problem for them. They want really good directors, and they get really good directors, but they also want to control it, and that's not always possible.
Are there other jobs you'd say you've talked yourself out of through conversations like that?
I don't live with regret.
No, I'm not suggesting you do.
I noticeably don't live with it.
So I've spotted that. Yeah.
If I've said no to a picture, I don't care. I've said no. I said no to Forrest Gump and The Fugitive as well. I mean, I knew they were going to be big films. You could tell. But it depends what you want to do at the time in your life and what your priorities are. But for instance, Doc Hollywood, I was doing a rewrite with Daniel Pine on it, and the studio, Michael Fox was waiting on that rewrite to see if he was going to commit to it or not. And at the same time, I'd read a script called Dying Young, which was Julia Roberts was going to do it with Sally Field. So I liked it very much, and I went to Fox to meet with Sally Field and Julia Roberts, and they said, "Okay, he's good, we'll have him." And I said, "Well, but I'm waiting on this rewrite coming back from Michael Fox, and if that's good, I give him my word that I would do it." And they said, "Oh yeah, right, okay." Because at that point, Julia Roberts was the new hot star. But the script came back, and I liked it, and I'd worked on it. And I tried to get them to wait, but they didn't want to wait. And you eventually have to say, "Nah, I can't do it. I have to make a choice." So you do that all through your career, and you can't regret it. I was taught very early on, it's not the ones you don't do, it's the ones you do.
Well, I can't imagine you're not massively proud of the one that came next, which is arguably one of the most underappreciated blockbusters of the 90s, and shamefully I was part of its problem in that I was one of those who didn't see it till years after. I'm talking about Rob Roy that you just mentioned there, and by the sounds of it, right, I mean, I spoke to Robert Zemeckis once, and he's very much of the idea that the film that you've just done is a reaction to the one that you've done before. And by the sounds of it, after the experience you'd had on This Boy's Life, almost coming home with Rob Roy sounded perfect for you. Can you talk just through the genesis of it? Because you said you had the script and you were trying. This sounds like the first one you were trying to push through the studio system yourself and get the funding for.
Yes, it was. I had, it's not just physical. After This Boy's Life was my first film that wasn't a success. Say, I had to think about, and I realized, it's easier when you're climbing the greasy pole. Yeah. Because you have an object in mind. You're trying to get up there, wherever there is, or whatever there means. And I had to take stock after This Boy's Life. The other films I'd made were more commercial and they succeeded, and this one wasn't. But I knew it was a good film. So I had to think to myself and say, well, I'm only going to really try and do films that I feel something about from now on, or if I need to pay the rent, one or the other. I have to. It's too hard. It's easy just to go and make money. It's really easy to go do that, but it's not fulfilling. It's not satisfying. As satisfying as it is if it's something that you really get in your stomach. So what happened was I was at the Edinburgh Film Festival and I was screening This Boy's Life, and I thought, well, I haven't been back in Scotland for some years, and I don't know if anybody, remembered me or knew that I was doing. Of course, the place was full of people I was at school with, and they had not only known what I was doing, they'd followed it. And I was like, so it was really a remarkable night for me to meet these people after being away for like 15, 16 years. Yeah. And they would all tell me how rough it had been, how bad it was in Scotland at the time, financially and what have you. And I thought, quite altruistically, it would be a good thing if I could bring a studio film to Scotland, and it might trickle down and show the countryside, get people there. I thought that's worthwhile. And I had read a script a few months previously about Rob Roy, but had been written in dialect. It was Alan Sharp's script, but had been written in dialect. So and I'm Scottish, and I can't make a fucking thing is going on here. So the first night I met the guy that night in the pub, I said, Peter, this is interesting. He said, no, I said, you're pushing an open door. Just get it written in English, and then we'll take it. So Peter Brown, the producer, got Alan onto it. He wrote it, absolutely just changed the words into English, and I took it to John Calley, as I said. Yeah. And he said, I really like it. I've got like 15 pages to go. Please tell me it doesn't fuck up. I said, okay, it doesn't. Because the script was really good when you could understand it. And I also knew Liam from film school. Liam was, he had come in and done some exercises with us at film school. And when I had gone to Hollywood, I had seen him, and he was up and coming. And then, of course, Schindler's List happened. Yeah. And suddenly he was, and the same happened with Tim Roth. I'd known him from London, and I met them again in Hollywood. And so for me, it was very easy to pull together a really good cast. Yeah. Because I knew some of them personally, and I could go back to Scotland and make almost like a home movie for me. I had John Hurt and Tim Roth and Andrew Keir as a miner from an area around where I come from. Brian Cox, and of course the woman who's the earth that I'm very fond of her walking on is Jessica Lange. And she was absolutely fantastic. As an American in Britain, she just embraced everything that was about. It was a really happy film to make.
Again, just talking to directors in the past, when you get to do a big outdoors film, that sounds like a particular delight, as long as it's not too cold. Is that your experience as well?
No, it's fucking miserable. The worst thing about Rob Roy is that you can't see any rain. I mean, the West Highlands are, it's like raining all the time. And we carry maybe 4 scenes. You'd start a scene, and then it would rain, or the clouds would go up, so you couldn't finish it. So you'd go on and do something else, and you had about 5 scenes ready to go whenever the clouds parted, and you'd run out and you'd do that, and you'd run back in. It's dodgy, and also the midges in Scotland. If you've ever been there, you'll know what the midges are like. The midges are the most monstrous thing, but it was it's kind of joyful walking about the Highlands and being paid to do it.
Yeah. There's a story around Rob Roy at the time, I remember, that Tim Roth was talking about. He felt he was on the verge of being fired. And I just wonder if you can talk to that a little bit.
Well, it's true. I mean, at that time, Tim was famous for Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
That's really was his big claim to fame. And, I knew him personally. But it was a big deal to him that he had never made a studio film. Ergo, he had never sold out. And this was going to be his first one, How easy it is. It's like prostitution. Once you do it once, it's easy after that.
Yeah.
But he, came in and his body language was not right. If you've got, when you have those costumes in that period, you have to go for it, even though you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You have to break that down. So, and I knew it was a really good part written, but Tim was, it was the upside down gun motherfucker. That was he was always apologizing for being there. And I could actually point out in the film the scenes that we did. So we did like 4 weeks, and then he went away, and then he came back. And it was during that first 4 weeks, I thought, if this is not working, if I can't make this work, I got to get someone else. Because you had to. It was too good. He was not committing to it. He wasn't committing to it. And I'm going, you should be like this and like that. So it's very important, the body language that you do, because you contrast in a way. And eventually he came back and he got it. And he got it like it was Charles. It's a combination of Terry Thomas, Charles Hawtrey. That's who he is. Yeah. But he is also the skinhead in Meantime.
Yeah.
So the two of these things, and Tim wanted to get that wig off all the way through, and I said, no, man, no, you got to save it for the moment right at the end. And once he takes that off, you're a full fucking skinhead, man. You got to kill him. And I was like, and then
it's quite a fight at the end as well.
It is. It's a long job that we started. I'm a big Kurosawa film also, and I watched the Seven Samurai again and again before this. So and also the guy Bill, can't remember his second name, Bill whatever. He was a sword master on The Duelists.
Yeah,
the film I admired for that. But we did a combination choreography, and it was choreographed from the beginning to the end. The story of the fight. He would get cut 2 or 3 times. It would start off that, then he'd get tired, and then it would be getting, and so it had the drama had a shape to it. Not only fight scenes are just stramash bang crash wallop, but like sex scenes, they only really work if you make a story in microcosm.
Yeah,
get you through. Otherwise, it's just stop for a bunch of clashing. And this was I saw Rob Roy as a cowboy film. And this was Gunslinger versus the good sheriff. So we choreographed it from beginning to end, and then we just shot the fuck out of it.
Yeah.
If it's not Tim's face or Liam's face, it's someone else.
Yeah.
It's really a mastery of editing that makes that sequence work. The other thing about it, and not many people know, is when I went to shoot the sequence, we did the first scene in there with the big crowd, and they were all standing and what have you, and then they all went away for lunch, and I was sitting there just trying to figure out how to do the afternoon. I thought, oh, this is a really good room, man. It's just a pity we're not going to see all that for all these people. And I suddenly got this idea, oh man, what if we got rid of them? And this was like almost like $250,000 in wigs and clothes and everything. And I went and I said, look, you're not going to like this. We got to get rid of everybody, because it changes the whole thing. It changes the whole feeling of this fight at the end. If there's a crowd there. Now, what I did was I took on from that idea. When we cut the film, when we were mixing it, they had crows, bats in the belfry, everything. I had music cues, whatever. I said, no. What we'll do is the same as we did when we shot it. We'll take everything out. So sound-wise, there is only breathing, some clanging, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it all the way through. And the silence works better than scoring it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm very anti that kind of Danny Elfman thing. It's way too busy and manipulative. But silence is really, really good. So it wasn't written like that, but it eventually ended up. And you've got to kind of try and stay open to things happening that might or might not work, and try and take the brave option where it might fuck up badly. Because when you do that, actually, in my experience, you do better work.
And the response to the film, I mean, I remember the response, again, being positive at the time, but was it enough to keep the doors open for you with what you wanted to do?
Yeah. I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do after. Well, I did know what I wanted to do after that. I wanted to go and do a very small film, which I was going to do with Steve Woolley and Harvey Weinstein.
That's B-Monkey.
B-Monkey, yeah.
Now that's the infamous story that you're the person who told Harvey Weinstein to fuck off.
Oh yeah, I called him cunt, actually.
Say again, sorry, just so it's clear on the mic.
I said, "Fuck off, you fat cunt, Harvey."
Did you say that well? I should point out to listeners that's convicted rapist Harvey Weinstein. Whenever I mention his name, I do have to say that. But that was over the casting. You tried to cast Sophie Okonedo, didn't you?
Yeah.
In that film, and he wasn't having it.
No, of course, for reasons everyone now knows, Harry was very involved in the casting of everything, and he basically didn't fancy her. That was what it was. Me and Sophie went out to California and spent a weekend out there at a hotel to meet Harvey, and he had no interest whatsoever in her. And I said, well, you know what? Fuck you, you're wrong. Don't fucking do it because you want to get laid, man. It was just. I remember Harvey from Scandal before he was Harvey Weinstein. So I was never really afraid of him. He was just a big bully. And I did know. I had heard, of course, about the settled sexual harassment suits. I knew it. Really, I knew it. Everybody knew it. If you cared to find out. Yeah. I was called by Variety. What happened is Harvey said, "Oh, Michael's walked off the film." I said, "What? When did this happen?" Because I brought it to you. And Variety called me up and said, "Well, what do you want to say?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. Here's a quote. I don't cast my films according to the angle of Harvey Weinstein's erection." Of course, they didn't print that for some reason.
And did you pay? Do you felt you paid a price for that?
Oh yeah, definitely, because I became difficult at that point. I had never been difficult before. I'd been, I'd made like 5 films and been, fiscally responsible and successful. And suddenly I was difficult to deal with. And Harvey is Harvey. Everybody knows it. Everybody knew it. And it's, as I said, it was like the end of the Second World War where all the Germans said, I didn't know nothing.
Yeah. I mean, around the same time, that's when you were lured back to Hollywood as well. You did the Jackal around then with...
Well, I had to get to work. I had to do something. I didn't want to do the Jackal particularly at that point, but because the film fell through in this acrimonious way, it was originally going to be Matthew McConaughey and Liam Neeson who were going to do it.
Okay.
And they wouldn't release Liam or McConaughey, I can't remember which, and we had to recast. And then Bruce Willis came chasing after it, and with Richard, it just mushroomed into this huge film, which I had never really meant to be. But it was a stopgap for me. I was doing it to get over. It's very painful when you work on a film and you get it almost to starting. And we were like 2 weeks from starting, and the thing gets yanked. It's like having being pregnant but not having the baby.
Has that happened to you before or since?
Yeah, it happened on Asher. We were 2 days from shooting. It was yanked, but all you can do is walk away. It is what it is. But the thing for the film director is you get paid by that film. You don't get anything until you do another one, which could be a year.
So when you were talking earlier about you do some films to pay the rent and some films because you really want to do, would it be fair to say Jackal was one of those closest to paying the rent?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the thriller, the big budget thriller genre is not. I can do it. It's not,
that was around the time as well where the stories were spiking about Bruce Willis being relatively hard work. And then I'd say again, sorry.
He was.
Okay, well, and then I read an interview with Richard Gere. I think it was an Arbitrage came out a couple of years ago in Total Film, where he talked about how he liked being the alpha on the set. And I mean, I just wonder, as much as you're happy to talk about what it's like being caught in between a big Bruce Willis, Richard Gere film, which by reputation wasn't the happiest of productions.
It was okay. It was hard. It was hard, not because of them. It was hard because we had a lot of different locations. We were Canada and all over the States, and then Europe, and then to eventually Moscow and Helsinki. It was just tough for traveling. Bruce and Richard, it was complicated. It was complicated. One of the good things was they're only in one scene together.
Yeah.
At the end. I met them and I liked them both individually. I wasn't aware that they had worked on Broadway sometime before.
Okay.
And Bruce was understudying for Richard. And Bruce had always remembered this and not forgotten. And now he was the big movie star. And there was so I had to, you do this thing where you bring the movie stars together before a film, you have lunch or something and you meet, but it's always like a sort of international sort of diplomacy gig. Yeah. So you sit there in the middle and there's Bruce and there's Richard, and Bruce is he was pretty Republican at the time, and Richard was pretty full-on Dalai Lama.
Yes, I remember the Oscars. Yeah.
Yeah. So they eventually get started talking about politics, and of course I'm sitting in the middle, and we're going to start shooting in a week or so, and they both start referring to me. They go like, "So, what do you think, Mike?" And you take my side or you take his side. I'm like, fucking, well, that's a good idea. And on the one hand, but on the other hand, I can see exactly. And it was like that from then on. It was like that from then on. Bruce was tricky. He was good to work with before we started and good after we finished. But in the middle of it, he was very insecure, to be honest.
Yeah.
And insecurity in actors plays out in different ways. Sometimes it cripples them, and sometimes it makes them become combative.
Yeah.
And the difficulty for Bruce is, of course, that he's done all these Die Hard films and big action pictures. So he had an opinion on every single aspect of what we were doing.
Yeah.
And he wasn't shy about telling us whether that was the wrong dolly we were using, or the right camera, or this or that. And he became tricky. He also had negotiated getting a private jet every weekend from the studio. So he would go back to Idaho, wherever. So every Friday, whatever we were shooting, he only wanted to do one take so he could get out of there and get on a plane. And I remember once we were shooting in Carolina, and we were going to meet him in Chicago, and he was on the schedule for the first scene on the Monday. And he said, and I've used it ever since, of course, he said, look, why don't you go ahead and set that scene up? You know the kind of stuff I like. And I'll come in the afternoon and we'll just walk straight in and do it. There'll be bang. So I'm like, fuck me, 20 million doesn't buy you anything, does it? And he's like, no, I can see. So, okay. So we go to Chicago. There's a scene with him sitting in a hotel room. I don't know what he's going to be doing. Nobody knows what he's going to be doing. So we start lighting it. We spend 3 hours lighting it for what he might do. And he comes up and it's like, hey, come on, boys, let's go, rock it. So I said, okay, Bruce, over here, you sat over here, you're doing that, and you get up and you walk over there. She says, I don't think I'd do that, And I was like, oh, you fucking cunt. You fucking sack of shit. This was all about you. And that happened a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. And, I like Bruce all right, but he was a pain in the ass to shoot with sometimes.
There's a story that I read of M. Night Shyamalan on the set of The Sixth Sense, and Bruce Willis was giving him shit in front of the cast and crew, and apparently Shyamalan just turned around and said Hudson Hawk to him. Yeah. And they just carried on, which apparently worked. So there you go. There's a tip if you're Pat. I mean, after the Jackal, there was a gap in terms of the films that you were making. That you did a bit of TV work, but then you were back with De Niro for City by the Sea in 2002. I've got that. I just wonder if you can just tell us about that period.
Well, it was kind of grim. I was going kind of through a divorce at the time. With my wife, and I was very unhappy, and I wanted to do that picture because it reflected a lot of stuff that I had going on in my private life. You know, separation, guilt feelings about children, what have you. And I figured I could get a lot of that shit out on that film.
Yeah.
I didn't really care if it was successful or not. I didn't really care if it was good or not. I just wanted to do something for myself at that point. And I was so, you know, the excess, when you're working on a big film, there's a lot of excess, and you have to ignore a lot of it because you can't do everything. But it really kind of disgusted me, and I didn't want to go back to that neck of the woods making those kind of films at that point. I wanted to concentrate more on acting, and it had to have, as I said, had to have some personal application to myself and my own situation. So I made that film. I haven't seen it since, to be honest, so I don't really know if it's good, bad, or indifferent. But you know, it was great working with Bob again, James Franco, and Franny McDormand.
Yeah. And then you came to two pictures that back to back couldn't be more a greater contrast, really. I'm just going to quickly reverse them because I want to get to the second one in a bit more detail. But I mean, perhaps there's no easy way to say it. I think the least liked of your films is probably Basic Instinct 2.
By me, by far.
Well, by you, it's the least liked as well. Would you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, because I remember the stories of that spiking up, that at one point Cronenberg was going to do it, McTiernan was going to do it, Pierce Brosnan was going to do it, Kurt Russell, I mean, all sorts of names. How did it come to you?
I was the mug.
Right.
Basically,
do you feel that way about it? Is it?
No, you know, as I say, I don't regret it. Even bad experiences teach you something.
Yeah.
You know, even bad experience, it's part of your life. You know, it was horrible. There are many reasons why it was horrible. There are many reasons why it was a really shit, awful film. But I went through it and you come out the other end. So I don't look back at it. The real truth is that I made Shooting Dogs. I could only make Shooting Dogs because I got paid for that.
Yeah.
That was really the truth. I did it because I had to pay the rent.
Yeah.
And I'd gone to Africa, and I'd spent 6 months there, and I had two young kids in New York, and I had to pay. I didn't get paid enough on the other one to keep them in food.
I mean, David Morrissey did a really lovely podcast interview with Richard Herring where he talked about Basic Instinct 2, and he finds all sorts of bits of joy just in the process of that. And I mean, I'm always interested in the human being when there's a target on their back and what it's like to be the human in the midst of it all. Did you find any positives in it? Was there any part of that experience that, you know,
I met my Hungarian editor by complete accident.
And who's your Hungarian editor? Sorry, let's get that.
A guy called István Király.
Yeah.
He speaks little English, but he speaks film. And we had to change editors on that film, and I had a Hungarian cameraman. He said, you know, I've got a friend who's really good that would step in immediately. And it turned out that he was an absolute genius, and I don't use that word much.
Yeah.
But he has a sensibility that has been in my films ever since. So that was one good thing. I liked the actors. I liked the look of the film. I detested Sharon Stone with a vengeance. I had to shoot every line of hers separately with the knowledge that I was going to put it together in the cutting room, because she couldn't do one performance all the way through. There's some tape going around of all her outtakes, which is, you know, I've probably watched more than I've watched Basic Instinct, to be honest. But it's, you know, I tried to get out of the film a couple of weeks before shooting, and they said they would sue me because someone had to direct it.
Yeah.
And you either get out to the end, you know, so I concentrated on the look of the film. I was disinterested in anything else to do with Sharon. It was just painful. We had quite a fight 3/4 of the way through, and it was very, very painful from then on for everybody.
Well, can we move on to Shooting Dogs then, which is a film that when I first got in touch with you about possibly doing this conversation, you said that it's just the forgotten one of your films. And I went away and watched it on a not very good DVD, a legal DVD, I should point out, but it's not a terrifically presented film. And I mean, I was really taken by it. And I could sit here and tell the story of what you did there, but I'd sort of rather you did it, if that's okay. Just the fact that you left a legacy with this extraordinary film.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I liked the film enormously. Again, since I'd made This Boy's Life, I knew that films that weren't commercially successful didn't mean anything, didn't make them bad films. The triumph was to get this one made. I was living in New York, and I wanted to do something that was back in Europe and something that was smaller and it wasn't a studio thing. And I read this and I thought, I'm pretty smart, and I really didn't know anything about Rwanda. And, I think I should make this and try and get this across to people that didn't know anything. So I went to the BBC, we flew to Rwanda, me and David Belton, the producer, to see if it was, I said, I don't know what Rwanda's like, and they wanted me to shoot it in South Africa. I said, well, they're probably not the same place. So we went to Rwanda, and I thought over a week, oh my God, you've got to make this here. This is incredible to look at, and the story itself. What happened was, making the film, it's a story about, sometimes referred to as Srebrenica, the Rwandan Srebrenica. It's basically when the coup happened, all the refugees, Tutsi refugees, ran to a school called the Call Technique. And that's where the UN were billeted, and they tried to be safe from the marauding gangs that were on there. And the marauding gangs actually surrounded the place, and then the UN left, and they left them to their fate, and the bulk of them were killed.
Yeah,
it's a story that is well known in Rwanda, and it actually sums up in a kind of microcosm a lot of what was going on. And I thought, if I could make this film for people who know nothing about Rwanda, they don't know a Tutsi from a Hutu, that they might begin to understand what it felt like to be there, and maybe ask themselves the question, what would I do if I was in that situation? So it was really simple for me when I got my hands on it, that this was what I was going to make, and I was going to do it. And it had to be calibrated. Again, there's different types of tension.
Yeah.
I think maybe you see one person killed in that whole film. But there is a feeling of dread and doom, and impending doom. Much like, I guess, I was using All the President's Men as an idea. You got something that everybody knows the outcome.
Yeah.
So how do you maintain attention to get yourself through to the end? And it was really, what I decided was, you don't actually see them until later on. And then you calibrate it up. You don't see the opposition, you feel it, you hear noises, and it becomes to get closer all around you. So if you look at the film, you can see that they start off with a few whistles, and then they start singing, and then there's more there, and then there's dogs and what have you. So it was kind of carefully calibrated. We shot it in Kigali, right at the place where it happened, and we had a lot of crew people who were, everybody is basically a survivor in Rwanda. But I had my video assist guy had actually been at the Call Technique, and he told me, he said, why is it called Shooting Dogs? I said, well, it's because the UN had a peacekeeping thing, and they could use their guns against dogs, but not against people. And he said, I understand. He said, because it's just, when I was hiding under the bodies, I could hear dogs coming, and I couldn't find my granny anywhere. And the dogs had come and eaten her. And you suddenly realize, oh my God, you're making a film, and this is their reality, And it was very, then you took on a responsibility. I'm really just a conduit to their story. So the more I can get close to their story, the better it'll be. So I started drilling them and saying, well, they said, no, the grenades went over there. They didn't go here. They went to that bit. And we all ran through that field. So you could actually use people to try and get as much veracity in it as possible. It was kind of a life-changing film for me in many ways.
Can you also talk to the fact that you, because it plays over the end credits of the film, that you trained people there to become filmmakers and part and parcel of the film. Can you talk to that a little bit for us?
Well, you turn up there. We were a very, very low budget production. We had taken, it was a German co-production, so we had some Germans there, we had some Scottish, English, Irish, and you go anywhere to make a film, it's a big deal. Say Florida, going to the small town of Florida was a huge deal to everybody there. So a Western film coming to Kigali, because Hotel Rwanda went to South Africa, so they were used to that. But in Kigali, we were like the first one for a long time.
Yeah.
You realize that you're offering maybe $5 a day to people as extras. That's like a month's wages for them. So everybody and their brother wanted to be in it. So you had to actually maintain a discipline. Some of them were Hutus and some of them were Tutsis, and it was kind of dodgy about it. But the Europeans had to take Rwandan crew members, and they had to train them. That was a big part of it. So we had a most magnificent experience where we were getting information from them about what it felt like, and they were empowered to take part in the filmmaking and make it. They realized that you can make this as it was. You can be part of it. You're not just there to make a few dollars. And what's happened since then is that the Rwandan, the country itself, every year they have sort of memorial celebrations, and they use the shooting dogs as the example of how they shouldn't wait for Western help or anything like that. It's an educational tool for them out there.
Good grief. Because Hotel Rwanda came out around the same time, but that wasn't shot in Rwanda, as I understand.
No, it wasn't. I didn't recognize the Rwanda in Hotel Rwanda at all. Yeah. No, neither did the Rwandans, because it's kind of racist, but to a certain extent, Western people think all Africans look alike, but there is different with Swedish and Spanish, and it's just their physicality. So when I watched Hotel Rwanda, it was kind of more Hollywood than what I found when I was in Rwanda itself.
So you described it as life-changing for you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me how it changed your life and what the ramification of it was?
Well, the sense of achievement you get out of doing something, despite the fact that people are saying, this will never make money, this will, the sense of achievement you get about sticking to something and making it exist against everything was really fulfilling. And I can differentiate between, I'm a professional filmmaker. That's always what I wanted to be. I've achieved my goal. I can do anything. I'll do it to the best of my ability. But the ones that you do that mean something to your soul, you can transcend with. And you've got to spot that opportunity when it comes and go, bang, this is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it. For yourself,
And so, I mean, just for the chronology for people who don't know, I've got it that there was about a week between you finishing on one film and starting on finishing on Basic Instinct and starting on Shooting Dogs. Is that?
They actually overlapped. I was cutting the film and I was looking for locations. And it was, it was utterly bizarre. I'd come from a place where you had, power cuts all the time and nobody could, people weren't eating properly, to the world of Sharon Stone, where it was bottles of Chateau Petrus at some hotel. It's kind of a bit of a mindfuck, actually, I found.
Yeah. And it was around this time that you first optioned the book Our Ladies as well.
Yeah, I think I had it before that. No, I had it before then. I think it was 1998 or 96 that I optioned it. Yeah, it was a long time. I'd been trying to get that together.
So 19. So what? I mean, so that's 20-year process.
Yeah. I was in Hollywood. I was doing quite well. I had some money, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to make my own film. After I got kicked off Bee Monkey, I thought this is not going to happen again. I'm going to do that. And I read the book, and I thought this is brilliant.
Yeah.
And I thought this will be no problem. You just go and get it made. Nobody wanted to make it. Nobody wanted to make a film about girls. Nobody wanted to make a Scottish one. I could have made it if I'd moved it to Buckinghamshire. Or had made it somehow different. But as I said, this is mine. I own it. If nobody wants to make it, I don't care. I'll take it to my grave. Mostly the British film industry just had no interest whatsoever. It was a US studio again that came to the rescue.
It was Sony that's back to that one, hasn't it?
It was Sony US as well.
Interesting. Because in the intervening period, I've got that between Basic Instinct 2 and Our Ladies, which I'll just come to. We'll just wrap up within a minute, if that's all right.
Yeah.
You did a couple of TV things. You did the film Urban Hymn with Shirley Henderson. I think you described working with. I should know. You described working with Shirley Henderson as an absolute delight.
Yeah.
I just wonder if you just want to do a sentence there, just for the brilliance of Shirley Henderson.
She's great. She was in Rob Roy.
Yeah.
That was her first gig ever. So I remembered her from then, and I thought, you're quite good. Next time I've got somebody, I'll do it. And, what's great about Shirley is her normalness. That's about it. Her normality. To just be and not act.
Yeah.
They're different things. And it works better on film than on stage or any other part of acting. But she can be normal and not overcomplicate it. And it's possibly because, she only had a couple of weeks to prepare for it.
Yeah.
But she was really, really useful for the two girls, for Letitia and Izzy, and who were both terrific in the film, but needed some guidance.
And then you did Asher, which became Hitman. I'm just checking on my other screen.
Hitman Redemption, yeah.
Hitman Redemption, and I mean, you've just said that shut down on you just before you started.
It did, yeah. It shut down. It was in New York. It was Ron Perlman's company, and they were getting money from New York State to shoot out of New York City, up in Syracuse, and. The weekend we were supposed to start shooting, New York State had a huge anti-corruption splash about these guys in Syracuse salting all this money away, and that was so they shut down all films. But they eventually got the money maybe 6 or 7 months later, and we started again and made it. And it was, I couldn't get arrested. I couldn't get any work. There was nothing to do. And I liked Ron Perlman all right. And usually it's the big problem is trying to get it cast. So here was a film with a cast in it. And the only problem was you had 20 days to shoot it.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out a way to do it, and try and make it look good in 20 days. And I found that I thought this was great. I thought this is a great way to work. I really enjoyed. So Urban Hymn, Shooting Dogs, and Our Ladies was all done for about the same money and the same time, and you really can do good work fast if you're experienced.
And I mean, which brings us to Our Ladies, which I had the pleasure of seeing. It feels like a very long time ago now, and yet we're talking about a film that's not in cinemas yet. You made it for the one studio that isn't sending stuff to streaming services as well, which means it looks like we're waiting out for a cinema release. Can you just tell me what drew you to Our Ladies, and then just really the process of ultimately when Sony US came in, how that came together?
Well, I read the book. The book is, it was a very, very accurate description of girls of a certain age in Scotland. It was very accurate. It reminded me of my youth. It reminded me of my big sister and her pals, how they would all go out on the raz. And it spoke very much to a kind of strength of femininity that I am used to in Scotland. Scottish women are kind of mouthy and strong, and I always liked that. I always thought that's what women were like around the world, but they're not necessarily so. And I thought, you know what, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen it done properly, done really the way it was. And I thought, this is going to be really funny. This is going to be great. This speaks to class. This speaks to opportunity. This, about what you do to try and get through the day, about friendship, about being alive. It had so many different nuances to it and not a strong story at all. So when I took the book and I gave it to Alan Sharp, and he wrote a draft, and it came back, and he was a brilliant writer, Alan. He's dead now, but he was a fantastic writer. But he used to write for Sam Peckinpah, and he was very good at doing westerns. But he really did not understand the tone
Yeah.
So, and that often happens. So he wrote this first draft, and we chucked it away, and I started myself doing it. And once I'd written it, I started taking it around, and nobody couldn't get past the front door. Said, we don't like the characters. Nobody's interested. Why don't you set it in England? And I thought, well, no, I really want to make this, and I just couldn't figure it out. So I went on and did all these other films. And my agent in London, there was a young studio executive called Luke Grace, who came from California, who was going around London agents saying, do you have any scripts unproduced that you think should be? So he found this, he read this, and he said, why the fuck has this not been made? Because he had no prejudices whatsoever.
Yeah.
No class prejudices, no xenophobia or whatever. He just said this. I said, yeah, well, I don't know either, but I would love to make it. So I had spent an awful lot of money on the rights to it over the years.
Yeah.
So I had to, I wrote all that money off and just to get it made.
Yeah.
So I'm the shittest businessman in the world, absolutely. But the film is made. And I don't, as I said, a good job. I don't feel regret. My wife does.
But I saw the interview. I was looking at some interviews just before we started talking of you in the way to the first screening at the London Film Festival, where you'd finished it just a few days before and promising interviewers you were going to drink like a fish once the screening was over.
I got completely hammered.
But was that one particularly special? Because you did get to see that in a packed crowd. And it was due to get a wide cinema release, early last year?
I got to tell you, I've never had a response like it, ever. Apart from when I screened Doc Hollywood before, to a test crowd. When you make a picture, if you make a drama or something, you sit in a cinema with an audience and it's pretty silent. You try and you're very attuned to whatever's going on around you, and you try and pick up vibrations. When you do a comedy, it's either win or lose.
Yeah.
They either laugh or they don't. And one of the greatest feelings in the world is having made a film that's supposed to have some humor in it and for people to start laughing in it. And I literally finished it on a Wednesday and we were screening it on a Friday. And that was 20 years to get it there. So I just thought, get it up on the screen and let's see how it plays. I was a bit nervous. But it was an 800-seat theatre, and they started rolling, man. They started laughing, and it was one of those things where the laughs rolled through. And there's a bit at the end where there's a kind of climactic bit where a bunch of different things are happening and they all come together.
Yeah.
The audience started laughing at the beginning of that, and it rolled all the way through. It was incredible. And I got 5-star reviews for this. And I thought, oh my God, I've never had that in my life. What the hell is going on? Why has this not been made before? Actually, I felt smug, yes. Yeah. But no, you just make them. All you do is make them. And it's great if people like them. If they don't, you just get on and make another one.
I loved Our Ladies. I absolutely loved Our Ladies.
I'm very pleased with it. It is the closest film to me I've ever made.
Yeah. So where does this all leave you now, apart from the fact that you've been locked up like the rest of us for however long? You've talked about how your last 2 or 3 films, you've changed the way that you've made them. Is that your ethos going forward? Is it more films now? Are there more projects you're spinning?
I think I got a lot of people saying to me they were surprised when they saw Our Lady. Like, it was not something that I would have done. They thought of me more as a sort of American or studio director. Our Ladies is the kind of film I've wanted to try and make for a long time, which is to use all, you not run away from who the fuck you are, but to use all the experience I've got working in a studio with really big movie stars and what have you, and try and bring that down to a level that you can use the same techniques, do it cheap, do it quick, give it vitality and give it relevance. Because what's happening now is a lot of films are losing it's becoming easier to be a director, to get to be a director. The job has not got easier, but getting to do it. And I feel, all I ever wanted to be was a director because I thought it was the most interesting job on a movie. But you had to learn a fuckload to be able to do it. And I don't think that, I think people think it's a lot easier now. I think people assume anyone can do it. Anyone can do it, but they can't do it twice or 3 times and get better. You know, that's the real difference. And I think, you know, the desire to have the newest, the latest, the whateverest is, you know, it makes it easier for people. But actually, I think there's a lot of directors, myself included, who are not working as much as we can and should because we're unfashionable and, you know, we have opinions.
Well, they'll never catch on opinions.
I know.
And also, if I can just say, you've told me in the past that you've kept books. You've kept all the materials from the making of all of your films. Do you have a temptation to do anything with that material at any point?
Yeah, of course I do. Because I find I try and demystify the filmmaking process. It really is simple, and it's people baffle you with bullshit, and it's mainly to make them look good. But the essential process is the same. You take a story, you give it to actors, you point a camera at them, you turn it on, you turn it off, you take it away, and you cut it up. That's what you do. Every film is made one shot at a time. One shot at a time. And you build it up from there. And there's a lot of technique that has gone out the window in the last 10, 15 years. Everyone has 2 cameras, 3 cameras sometimes. You just shoot and keep shooting. Well, you're going to get some interesting stuff by accident, but not by design necessarily. And film, to me, is about control. This is the thing that I tried to teach Leo right from the beginning. It's about control. What you can control, you then release and then bring it back in. But if you don't control, and sometimes there's moments that you want things to happen that you can't invent. So you then create a circumstance that can happen. But essentially, it's about control. It's about set the shot up, walk it through, get your focus marks, inflect it a bit there. Don't turn them at that point, turn them at that point. You know, all these little things add up. And that's direction to me. It's not just, you know, you're sitting there and getting people bring you cups of tea.
Well, that sounds bliss, that bit to me.
Yes. No, but it's, you know, it's as good a job as you want it to be. And I love it. Actually, it's the best fun I ever have with my clothes on. Yeah.
Michael Caton-Jones, this has been an absolute delight, and thank you for letting me horrifically overrun as well. I've talked to you for a long time. And that brings to an end my conversation with filmmaker Michael Caton-Jones. His new film, Our Ladies, well, we're waiting on a release date for it. Sony Pictures is set to release it. I understand it's still going to cinemas. I certainly hope so. It's been screened. It's complete. Sony is the one studio that's really adamantly supporting the big screen as much as it can. So as soon as I've got information, I'll put that on the Film Stories website. Michael dropped in the name Leo just towards the end of the conversation. Just for clarification's sake, that's Leonardo DiCaprio, who he worked with on This Boy's Life. Which all brings me to the end of this special episode. I've really enjoyed this. I hope you have too, of Film Stories. You can get more of my waffle on Twitter at Simon Brew. You can get the entire Film Stories project on Twitter at Film Stories Pod. The website, filmstories.co.uk, is where you'll find an awful lot more. You'll find reviews, news stories, feature. Every weekday we update that. You can buy our print magazines at store.filmstories.co.uk. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/filmstoriesonline, and YouTube at youtube.com/filmstories. Most of all, though, I thank you so much for listening. Thank you for lending me your ears. I'll be back soon with your regular episode of Film Stories. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.